Hey guys, hope you enjoyed that video. It was a long time coming. It was a lot of hard work. My computer almost died like 5 times, but hey, here it is. Big shout out to people who made the music as well as some of the models. All of their information will be
This is our only chance. We have to take it. We need Kong. The world needs him to stop what's coming. And this child, she's the only one he'll communicate with.
I knew that they had a bond. She had nowhere to go, so I made a promise to protect her. And I think that in some way, Kong did the same. It's Godzilla.
These are dangerous times.
Godzilla's out there and he's hurting people and we don't know why.
There's something provoking him that we're not seeing here.
I'm of the same opinion.
The myths are real. There was a war. And they're the last ones standing.
I keep reaching for greatness because I'm built from it.
Who bows to who?
Nobody gonna stop me.
Kong bows to no one.
And on that scream, Kaiju fans, welcome to the Godzilla panel. Woo! My name is Kevin Garcia. I am a professional comic book historian, and by that I mean Marvel has paid me money to read comic books. It was not a lot of money, but it's still fun to say. With us, we have Matt Frank, who is the official Godzilla artist on many, many projects, and also other kaiju, which we're going to talk about as well. And Robert Pruitt, who is, for this weekend, you are Godzilla.
That's all right.
I cannot think of somebody better to have on the panel. So to start us off, Matt Frank, because I know many of the people here have not heard of Godzilla, could you explain what is the appeal of Godzilla?
I mean, it's really multifaceted because it really comes down to trying to convey the history of the character in a succinct manner, and that's very difficult. But, you know, I think that on a very, very visceral surface level, it's a big monster. He destroys stuff. There's a power fantasy element to it. There is a, you know, and of course, it's really appealing to kids because it's this dinosaur-like creature and breathes atomic breath, and there's a huge rabbit hole's worth of films and comics and TV shows and to check out. And then beyond that, there is the fact that the Godzilla series, if you trace the entire Godzilla series, you kind of get a vague sense of the socio-political climate of Japan through the last 65, almost 70 years, and how that extends to the rest of the world as well. So there's lots of different reasons why someone would like Godzilla.
And then purists often talk about Godzilla being man in a suit.
Yes.
And I think an argument could be made for the green screen suit, possibly kind of still doing that, but it's not quite the same. Robert, what is it like to be the man in the suit?
First off, it's extremely hot. Like, no matter what you have in there, fans, air conditioning, you're going to get. So it's taxing for sure, because when you're in the suit, you get hot, but you're trying to entertain fans and things like that. So you're trying to move around, trying to be Godzilla. But when you do, you know, you're wearing yourself out real quick. So that's the one thing that a lot of people don't understand is, like, you know, it's not like a light and airy costume. It's a heavy suit.
You made that yourself, right?
Yes, I made all.
How long was the process?
Well, so this is the third iteration that I've made. It took about 8 months. It's mostly made out of foam covered with quilt batting, and then I slap it all on with.
Okay. Most serious question I've had for the night, Matt. Jealous?
Well, that he has a Godzilla suit, yes.
That's what I meant.
That he has to wear it, I don't know so much, because I put on a monster suit exactly once. I did it one of the last times I went to Tokyo. A friend of mine made a short film called Howl from Beyond the Fog, with the monster suit supervised by Keizo Murase, who's been he'd worked on Godzilla movies from the 50s into the 90s, so the guy knows his stuff. And they asked me at one point, do you want to put the suit on? And I was like, yeah, let's do this. It's a four-legged monster, which means you're on your hands and knees. And I can imagine, Robert, that you probably can't see very much out of your suit.
No, not at all.
But you're still functioning looking forward.
Yeah.
You can sort of get a vague sense of what's in front of you. Yeah, this monster suit, your face is looking at the floor, and your head is actually locked into place in this padded thing. You cannot see anything. And immediate claustrophobia. And at one point, they tried to put the back on, because they take the back off to put me in it. And I kind of got used to it for a second. And then as they were putting the back on, I said, nope, I'm out. I had to tap out. So I don't envy that part of the job.
Okay,
That's a fair question.
That is a good one, yeah.
Where are those suits now?
The very first one got tore up. The only thing I have left of it is so that was kind of sad. But the second one, I tore it apart and made it pieces out of for the thirds.
So mostly cannibalized, recycled.
For the most part. I mean, if you're buying material, it gets costly. Use what you can. I mean, matter of fact, the first suit was actually made out of old couches. Anyone who had an old couch cushion, I stole.
I mean, that's basically how they do it in Japan.
Yeah.
They cannibalize a lot of the old suits. It's a fairly common process, especially because they would get so torn up, and a lot of those suits, they don't last very long, especially if you're using them for water scenes or shooting bottle rockets at them. So,
well, even this one that I've got, it's been about 5 to 6 years now, so you can tell by the latex is starting to. So if you get a chance, just check out the suit, squeeze on the hands, look at the arms. It wears down quick, especially in Texas.
Yeah.
Now, by the way, I'm going to be asking some questions to these guys, and they probably throw some questions at each other. But once again, if you guys ever have any questions, just pop a hand up. We'll get to you, okay?
Yeah.
So you mentioned Japan a second ago.
It exists.
Yes, this is
Country.
true. It's not just something from the movies.
That's kindergarten. I thought it was something that only existed in the movies, and then I met a little girl from Tokyo in my kindergarten class, and I was like,
"You're like, fine, I'm from Narnia too."
Well, no, I remember asking her, like, "Wait a minute, it's not just in the movies?" And she's like, "Oh, this dumb white guy." I'm like, "Yeah, get ready for a lot of that." But yeah, so anyway, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say that you got to go. I don't know if you went before that, but you got to go at least a few times, several times, invited because of your art, right? Because of your work with Godzilla. So what I'm getting at is what led to that, and then what was that like?
Well, I have been working on Godzilla comics since 2010, 2011, starting in late 2010. And those comics, you know, I worked with IDW consistently on those comics for 6 years until about 2016. So as that continued, a couple times people started reaching out to me saying like, hey, you should really start coming to, there's cons here you can come to. And I'm thinking like, oh, they don't want all this. And then they're like, no, there's cons specifically for international comic creators. Like they literally have a show called the International Comics Festival. And I'm like, okay. So I started going, and the main thing that kept me going back was because my Godzilla comics started getting translated for the Japanese market. And that was a really big treat because I think it's the first time an American Godzilla comic had been translated for the Japanese market. And
I doubt that happened with Marvel's Godzilla.
Which breaks my heart because that, of all the Godzilla comics, that's my favorite.
Those were fun.
It's really fun. Yeah, and it kind of culminated. I want to say, yeah, it was either late 2019 or early 2020. That was the last time I was in Japan was right as the pandemic was starting. There were people who were like supposed to come see me at a con I was at, and they would be emailing me because they're coming from China. They're emailing me being like, yeah, our airport just got shut down, so can you mail this to me? So anyway, but one of the last times I went, I had a signing at the Godzilla store in Tokyo that was, and I believe I was the first person to do that. Because when my publisher reached out to them and said, hey, you know, Matt-san would like to have a table. And they're like, what? What do you mean? Table? No, just because nobody had really wanted to do that before that point. And we had a line out the door, which I was like, oh, God, they like me. Has anybody told them yet? So, that's the long of the short of it.
Right, but once you were there, and it's cool to have them like you, you also got to interact with some of the people who are behind the Godzilla franchise, didn't you?
Oh yeah, I'm very
so
very fortunate.
Whatever you're allowed to say. What happened?
Well, what happens in Tokyo stays in Tokyo.
Yeah,
but
I know, right? It's NDAs when it comes to Godzilla, man. You don't want to know who's going to win the monster fight.
Well, I mean, it's a lot of them are retired from acting. You know, acting in Japan doesn't carry the same connotations that it does in the States. For a lot of people, it's just a job, and they do it. They'll do one or two characters or a TV show or something, and then they'll go do something else. They'll go the first what we consider to be the first Red Ranger, the Tyranno Ranger from the Dinosaur Sentai that became Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. He owns a farm now. That actor just and it employs an entire town. Like it's just so wild that it's just this complete left turn. But I remember, for example, I got to have dinner with Akira Takarada, who is one of the lead actors from the original Godzilla, one of the only living actors from that movie.
From the very first movie.
From the very first one. He was Ogata, the young Navy officer. And we were having dinner, and he didn't speak a whole lot of English, but we had a translator with us, and I asked him what he thought of Godzilla King of the Monsters. And he said it was like watching a fireworks show. He said people sure do like their fireworks. And then I told him, I think it's going to sell a lot of classic Godzilla Blu-rays. And he thought about that for a second. He said, I'm going to tell Toho that next time I have a meeting with them. So I've gotten to meet a couple of quite a few different people from the series, and they're all really chill, very down to earth. I have one more, and then we can move on. So when we were doing the Japanese versions of the Godzilla comics, we were doing these collaboration covers where I would draw a monster, and then we would get another Japanese artist to draw another monster, and we'd have them fighting each other. And I got some really big names, at least to me and to Godzilla fans, like Shinji Nishikawa, who had been designing Godzilla monsters since 1989. Yuji Kaida, who's like this huge international artist, internationally recognized artist. And then one of the last ones, I was struggling a little bit because I'm like, oh, I don't know who to reach out to. I don't know who to reach out to. And then I thought, oh, we need to get, there's no joke, this is what he's known as. We need to get Hurricane Ryu. Hurricane Dragon is what he goes by, because he's a comic book artist, storyboard artist, and suit actor. And we need to get him to draw a monster for this cover. And we got him to do it. I never interacted with him. I never emailed him. The publisher did handle all that. I went to Tokyo to Comic-Con, and specifically Tokyo Comic-Con, and this guy comes up to me, and he kind of grabs my translator and introduces himself, and he said, "Oh, Matt, this is Hurricane Ryu. He just wants you to know that he was the guy who drew this monster for this cover." And I said, "I know, I asked for you." And he's like, "How do you even know who I am?" Like, that's the thing I get the most, is how do you know any of this? And it's because I'm a nerd and I know this stuff.
Yeah, I like that you say I'm a nerd without any kind of shame, because sometimes people say that, like here especially, that's that nerd cred. All right, so you mentioned introducing somebody from the original Godzilla to the newer Godzillas. And what I want to ask both of you guys is, what do you think about some of the different iterations of Godzilla? While we were waiting for this to start, we saw the little lineup of all the different Godzillas. They get taller and taller and then shorter again for some reason and so on. Let me ask, Robert, do you have a favorite Godzilla, either movie or Godzilla creature itself?
It's always going to be Burning Godzilla. His color scheme, that style of the suit, I loved everything. Plus the heart tug for the movie, so that's my favorite one.
Those last 10 minutes sure are emotional. I'm not being facetious. That's 100% true. It's very difficult for me to pick one because
don't necessarily pick a favorite, but can we compare them?
I pick one and
no, I'm saying, like, how would you say they rank against each other? It could be power wise, it could be story wise, it could be like, this one's better for this, but this one's better for that. So I'm saying that one doesn't have to be the best.
No, that's a great point, because I've always said that the Godzilla should fit the story. It's the right Godzilla for the right story. Sometimes in some of the comics, some artists will grab a version of Godzilla and they'll use it as sort of a protagonistic force. And I'm like, well, that Godzilla was completely villainous in his film, and that doesn't fit. But whatever, that was their choice. If they like that version, what am I going to do? Cry about it? So what am I going to do? Get him? So
you could.
I could.
Moving on.
Won't say how. No, I love them all for different reasons. There's some that I like more than others. I love Godzilla 2000. I love GMK Godzilla because GMK is my favorite Godzilla movie. Burning Godzilla is dope. Funny you say that, how they kind of get bigger and bigger and bigger, and then they get smaller again. So in the 90s, Godzilla was 100 meters, over 300 feet, and he's and they wanted to scale him up so that he would be a little more in scale with all the modern high rises that had popped up throughout the 80s. But one of the things that they started getting complaints from fans was that the buildings weren't detailed anymore, because the bigger scale you make something, is the less detail you put into it. So they shrank him back down in the early 2000s to around 50 meters or 55 meters so they could get more detail out of the buildings in the miniatures they used. And but then after a while, they were like, everybody's just using CGI, screw it. And then they just made him bigger and bigger and bigger until you get to the trilogy on Netflix, where he's over 1,000 feet tall, because he's like, it's like way in the future, and he just never stopped growing.
Well, we talk about different Godzillas for different stories. That Netflix trilogy got some interesting reviews. But but the idea is that it was trying to do something different with Godzilla, which I think is fair, right?
I have nothing but respect for it for trying something new. But I can't remember what the saying is. It's like telling a story is kind of like jumping off a cliff and building wings on the way down. I don't think they had any glue. I think that it just, oh no. But yeah.
But then Singular Point is the new one out on Netflix, and I've only seen one episode so far. I need to watch it, but what I did see blew me away, and the reason I haven't watched more is I keep trying to get more people to watch it with me. I'm like, this looks good.
You just need to binge it by yourself.
Yeah.
Have you seen it?
Yeah, so I'm halfway through, so I'm trying to catch back up. But, I was a little apprehensive, for Jet Jaguar design. But no, it's
a precious, precious boy, precious baby.
So, well, let's touch on that. So, Jet Jaguar traditionally is this like literally a man in a suit, usually just a guy in a skin tight suit, the size of Godzilla, punching him, right? But correct me.
They didn't fight in the original movie.
No, yeah, sorry, I'm sorry.
But,
you're right.
Come on, man.
No. I have that on VHS still.
I know.
But my point is it'd be that size. And in Singular Point, again, I've only seen the first episode. It definitely has a very much built in a garage feel, and I feel like that works for the story they are telling there.
That's exciting. That's
but if you put that into like the Godzilla of the Godzilla versus Kong or King of Monsters, it wouldn't be quite the same, right?
I think a lot of it comes down to
it depends on how they do Kong and how they play the story into
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I like that. I really like that it has a built in a garage vibe, because that's what the original was supposed to be. He's supposed to be a thing built in somebody's house. Just this guy makes a robot. It just happens to look like a superhero. But yeah, what you see, you're about halfway through it.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on it?
I don't know. So far, like I said, I was a little apprehensive, and I was like, the character designs, but. You can't look at that when it comes to a storyline, but
I think it depends on, like, again, how does it serve the story? Because the designs of the characters I really like, because they're trying some really new stuff. Mm-hmm. Like they do Manda, the sea serpent kaiju, and in the original film that Manda appeared in, it's just a sea dragon. It's just horns and whiskers. It's just a traditional Asian dragon. Right. So for Singular Point, they said, okay, well, let's take the silhouette of like a sea dragon, but we get into the details, and it's made out of like a shark, a shrimp, a centipede, and like an oarfish. It's made out of all these different sea creatures, but it still has that basic silhouette, which I think is very smart. I think that's a great creature design.
Does that up the horror a little bit? Like I like the description there, and also Shin Godzilla we talked about a little bit earlier, which is a different type of the creature itself than you've seen in previous Godzilla movies. Godzilla seems to fluctuate between Godzuki, for kids, and Shin Godzilla, where it's like a body horror thing that you can't look away from, destroying a city. Either one can be good. Do you have a preference? Do you think it should be more for kids or more just go over the top monster?
I don't know. You get into a weird thing with it. So I like the kid versions more just because it's funner to get along with. Plus, you've got when you get to the darker ones, it's more geared. I guess I'll go with the kids, but I really like Godzilla.
I think that it's important to remember that it is, I'm going to quote David Callett here, who's sort of a Godzilla film historian. Sort of, he wrote a book about it. He wrote something I thought was very salient, which is, it is asinine to narrowly draw the focus of Godzilla in any way that excludes children. I mean, even some of the darker and or adult targeted stuff, it's still mostly accessible. Like it doesn't prevent, like I would not want to see an R-rated Godzilla movie. I don't think there's any benefit to that.
It'd be like trying to imagine them making a movie that had like Batman using cuss words and also having R-rated violence. They would never do that.
What? Yeah. Who? What kind of lunatic? Ants on his head, moron. Anyway, go ahead.
But back to the track of having different purposes for different things, and also keeping those limitations within the genre of Godzilla. Shin Godzilla is also one of my favorites. It is not like the others. I think when they hired, who's the director who did the first American one for the current Legendary series?
Gareth Edwards.
Gareth Edwards. When they hired him off of Monsters, that was a different kind of kaiju movie, Monsters. And I feel like Shin Godzilla has that kind of like art house feel to its story. And I've heard a lot of people complain about it. Like friends I know didn't like it; they found it boring because it is a lot about politics. But also, it's like I liked that it was different.
It's so funny whenever I talk to people, mostly Americans, who think it's boring, and the thing is that you don't make a Godzilla movie and then have it be the most successful domestic Godzilla film, Japanese-made Godzilla film since the 1960s without it resonating on some level. People aren't just going to watch the 9.5 minutes of a lizard, spitting fire. It's the thing is that movie is brutally satirical of the Japanese political system, and every one of the people in the audiences in Japan, they are like, okay, totally. I mean, I saw it in the theater in Japan, no subtitles. And yet I was there with two of my friends who both work for the government and American government. They came with me, and they're both like, yep. And, no subtitles.
A national tragedy in which the government doesn't get together to solve it?
I can't imagine.
No. Well, okay, so what about the design of Shin Godzilla? Because I described it a second ago as saying body horror. That's what I think of when I think of it kind of like shaping in ways that are unnatural. What do you think of the design choices in Shin Godzilla, which are more extreme than most other Godzilla changes, I would
just the way he mutates and transforms, that's what draws me. But his final form, or whom is his final form? Yeah, no, the way he was burned and everything, that's what you would expect from radioactive. So I thought they did a really good job.
I mean, I agree. It's this idea of taking the original concept of Godzilla, which is, I always find it so funny whenever people talk about Shin Godzilla. I'm like, it's just so different. I don't even think it's Godzilla anymore. And I think about that, and I'm thinking, no, it's Godzilla. What they did was they went back to the original, and they boiled it down to its base elements. And they were like, what is this? This is an atomically mutated life form that somehow becomes so powerful it can't be stopped. There's no way to stop it, and it just becomes this juggernaut. Because even from a base design, it was clear that they took the original maquette, the little statue, the sculpture that had been made to base the Godzilla suit on. It has this big, puffy head shaped like a mushroom cloud. It has these little claws that are turned upwards, and this bulky body, and this texture is, I think the term is keloid scarring, which is the scarring from radiation burns. Like, yeah, they took it and they said, okay, in a radioactive creature that's been mutated by atomic radiation, it's going to be disgusting. It's going to be upsetting to look at. And that's what I like about it, is that they just said, yes, we're not a hero. And I love Hero Godzilla.
It has a mouth on its tail.
Yep.
Why?
You have to ask.
I kind of, there's many times where I'm like, I don't want to know. This time I'm like, no, why? What? Is this more part of the mutation aspect of it, making it more of like unnatural?
Oh, sorry.
No.
Do you have any thoughts about that? No?
I'm not really sure. So, like, I like to think that it is the next iteration of.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they just wanted to. I think at a certain point, Anno, the director, and the designer, Maeda, were just going back and forth. I have this giant making of Shin Godzilla book. I mean, this thing is huge, and it has all this concept art in it. and they were really going wild at certain points, like getting real weird with it. So you can tell that they're just kind of throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks, and they probably have some kind of internal logic for it. But like with Evangelion, which Anno also made, he's got a bunch of stuff that he just doesn't tell the audience. He says this entire lore written out. You figure it out.
I think that's a good way to do storytelling sometimes.
Well, sure. That's how I've written some comics that way, where I have a whole backstory, but I don't address it.
Well, before we get to that, because I do want to ask you about that. Before we get to that, I want to ask you now about, we've talked a lot about Godzilla in Japan and the history of it and the meanings of it as it changes and for the different audiences. What about the American take on Godzilla? I mean, from Raymond Burr to Godzuki to TriStar, you know. Robert, do you ever watch the original Godzilla, the original black and white one?
Oh, yeah.
I'm assuming you watched the American version with Raymond Burr in it.
Well, yeah, I mean, you got to watch both.
Well, so that's my question. Like, how long before you found out that this wasn't the original version? As they added, like 20, 30 minutes to it? Just
oh, like maybe 10.
I'm going to be real honest. It's probably 10, 15 years ago, if that.
So, like, as an adult?
Yeah, so, I mean, that's the one that we always associated with. Raymond Burr is the first one. And even when you go to, like, say, a convention or anything like that, that's the first thing that people will say. Well, I watched the original with Raymond Burr. I'm like, no, technically the original, but yeah, I mean, it is.
I think that the American version with Raymond Burr kind of gets a bad rap because they don't disrespect the source material. I mean, there's some stuff they kind of trim out either because it's stuff that Americans won't pick up on, or it's like mired in Japanese culture so much that, you know, again, it kind of stops the movie if you don't understand what's going on. And yet at the same time, that was the first time anyone had done something like that. No one at that point in history, no one by that point in Hollywood had spent that kind of money on an adaptation of a foreign property. And at that point, the highest grossing Japanese film in America was Rashomon. And I think it had grossed $10,000. Like, and I'm talking like all over, like that's all of America. That's the entire American run of Rashomon. And it was a critical success, but, you know, it wasn't like this giant mainstream success. And by comparison, Godzilla, King of the Monsters with Raymond Burr made $2 million, which at the time was astronomical. The cheap and quick way to get a foreign movie into theaters at the time was to subtitle it and let it play in art houses. But after King of the Monsters, you didn't dub a movie. You did not spend the money to dub a film or adapt it unless you were confident it was going to make money.
Well, you said earlier that when the new movies come out, they're going to re-release the originals. They're going to bring new attention to the originals. Something I've always said about remakes. I love remakes because even if the remake sucks, we're going to get a new copy of like when King Kong. Like, I like Peter Jackson's King Kong well enough, but when it came out, they re-released all the original ones with Willis O'Brien stuff and everything else, and I loved it.
Oh, yeah.
So does the Americanizing of Godzilla serve to better serve the franchise, I guess, make it more international? Is it worth it when they're going to do things like the Matthew Broderick movie?
I mean, it is one of those things where you gotta take your sugar with your medicine a little bit, or, you know, a double-edged sword, whatever clumsy metaphor you want to use. Although historically, I would say that most times when Americans try their hand at Godzilla, even in some of the better attempts and better iterations, they don't quite get it. There's a little something missing. And I think it's because, this is a bit of a bummer, but Godzilla is inextricably tied to cultural trauma. It was the atom bomb, and it was living under the shadow of the atom bomb. The only country to ever have an atom bomb dropped on it, 2 atom bombs. And we have a completely different relationship with atomic power from our perspective. So that's why in the newer Godzilla he's not a mutation. He's this ancient demigod, this protector of the balance or whatever. And I'm sitting here, he's a radioactive monster. It's
They had radiation back then.
radiation back then.
Robert, what do you think of the new Godzilla movies? The legendary ones, the ones here in the U.S.
You know, you can't go wrong with monsters. That's just
Are fun.
so. And
Yeah.
that's
Let
all they're
them
designed
fight.
for is entertainment. Well, that's
Sure. I mean, the monkey punched the lizard.
oh yeah.
And that was neat. And the lizard punched the dragon, and the lizard also punched the bugs that were just trying to have babies, and
They were happy bugs.
they were happy bugs. Godzilla was like, "Get off my lawn," which is the planet.
Well,
I do agree with you that they do take away when they change the story that he's a demigod, not and makes him.
I also get a little grumbly about it because the whole like protector of the balance, but it's borderline amoral, but mostly good. That whole shtick, that's Gamera's thing.
Is what I was going to get to, because you've also contributed to Gamera's stuff recently. You did was it the DVD set?
Yeah, Arrow put out the big Blu-ray set of all 12 Gamera movies, and I did the art for the whole thing.
And one thing I whenever talks of Godzilla come up, I bring up Gamera with people, and a lot of Americans they love Godzilla, they don't have no idea who Gamera is. So why is that? What is Gamera's deal?
Well, I mean, I always, whenever people say like, oh, Godzilla is just, or Gamera is just Godzilla but a turtle, and I'm like, okay, then I guess Spider-Man is just Superman, but he does this. Like that's what I hear, because while Gamera would certainly not exist without Godzilla, Gamera has its own a flavor all of its own, and especially the '90s films that are just these, because you've seen them, I'm sure.
Oh yeah.
And they're so freaking good.
I have not seen the '90s
They're
I need to.
They share a little bit with Shin Godzilla in that the effects director from Shin Godzilla worked on the Gamera trilogy from the 90s, and he was the storyboard artist from Evangelion. So, yeah.
Well, let me ask you, let's say the American ones keep going. I haven't heard an official announcement that it is, but I also haven't heard an official announcement that it's not. So where do you go from here? I mean, the first movie, we have Godzilla. Second movie, we have, well, let's get all the greatest hits out that Americans are aware of anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third got King Kong. How do you go bigger?
Ooh.
Bigger.
Got some ideas?
Well, they did make a Godzilla.
More mecha?
Godzilla in
More
space?
mecha in general.
Space Godzilla.
God.
I would like
I did too.
just their iteration.
It'd just be neat to see. Yeah. I of course, I'm also thinking about all the marketing involved in it, because King of the Monsters didn't do that great.
No, not as it should have.
And that's because there isn't the same kind of. I remembered like talking to people who had either seen it or thinking about seeing it, and they were surprised that the monsters were such a big part of the story, because Americans don't really have a monster culture where you don't. A lot of the mainstream Americans don't go to movies to see monsters. Like they should, but and so as a result, a lot of mainstream Americans don't know why should I care about this bug? Why should I care about the pterodactyl? Why should I care? But then Godzilla versus Kong hits that cultural moment of everybody knows who Kong is, everybody knows who Godzilla is.
That's where my brain goes. And my thing is like, as much as I would love to see Jet Jaguar or something, I feel like you need to have that crossover potential. And I'm like, what could they possibly do? Now in my head, it'd be Godzilla versus Gamera, but for reasons we just discussed, Americans wouldn't care. I also think Godzilla versus Ultraman would be amazing, but again, Americans wouldn't care.
Oh my God.
So what could you do if you were a producer of Legendary and you're like, okay, this is one American audiences will care about, and doesn't matter what the rights are, we can go find the rights to do it. Who would Godzilla fight that could actually outdo Godzilla versus Kong?
Stay Puft Marshmallow Man.
Yeah. I can't argue with that one.
Yeah.
He
I don't
can
wanna
be,
get- I
but
wanna get
technically
into it.
Technically, he's a great old. He's basically like a Lovecraftian god. If you
It is, yeah.
So you
Yeah.
could go that direction.
Honestly, I don't know if you can get bigger than Godzilla versus Kong in America. I think for us,
Yeah, I just don't know where else. I honestly don't know where else they could go with it and justify a $150 million budget. Because
Power Rangers. Like I realize that
You
has
gotta
other
get-
culture. I realize that is other cultural history thing, but I'm trying to think what
you
American
gotta
audiences
you gotta
follow.
get a lot of different licensors to work with each other. The only reason I want to be clear about this, people, the only reason Godzilla versus Kong happened is because Kong is public domain.
Technically.
That is the only reason. If they had any licensors they would have had to work with, like Universal or something, wouldn't have happened. It doesn't matter how much money it would have made getting these companies to work with each other. I mean, you guys have seen Sony and Disney each yanking on Spider-Man's arms, like that. It's a nightmare behind the scenes. What I want to see is I want there to be another Kong movie because they have a little bit of trouble with Godzilla sometimes. I mean, he looks great and there's great action and he looks and feels like Godzilla. Story-wise, when they try to justify Godzilla and what he's doing, I find it a little shaky. But Kong, they nail it with Kong. I want to see, bear with me here. I want the next one to be, okay, everybody just, all right, is King Kong versus Frankenstein.
I am down for that.
Now, I'm seeing a couple people who are like, who is this person and why is he here? The reason the original King Kong versus Godzilla was made was because it was born out of a pitch treatment by Willis O'Brien called King Kong versus Frankenstein, where a descendant of Dr. Frankenstein creates a giant Frankenstein monster out of elephant parts and stuff. And then Kong somehow gets involved, and the two of them have a fight in San Francisco. And I think you could do something so cool with that concept. And building on the whole Hollow Earth thing, they opened up when they were doing the Godzilla vs. Kong.
You just want to see more of Hollow Earth.
I really want to see more of Hollow Earth.
I wonder what the sun looks like. It's always out of frame. Always out of frame.
It's so the Hollow Earth thing is so weird because it's really mired. Specifically, the version that Adam Wingard used in the movie is really mired in conspiracy theory thought.
Which I was surprised
Very
they went ahead
weird
with some of the conspiracy theory approval stuff they did in that movie. And I was like, but maybe you shouldn't encourage that.
It sucks because conspiracy theories aren't fun anymore.
Yeah.
They used to be fun, where it's like, oh yeah, Hollow Earth, oh yeah, aliens, and now it's like not fun anymore. It's not fun anymore, and because it went mainstream, and the mainstreamers got a hold of it. It's not just on AM Coast to Coast anymore. But yeah, that was my idea.
Oh no, I believe me, I'm down for King Kong versus Frankenstein for exactly that reason. I'm also familiar with that, and I love that idea. I kept thinking like Jurassic Park, they're not big enough, and then also they're dinosaurs.
You also got to get Universal.
No, I'm saying pretending you could do that. Like
pretend like if there was
the
no
if the contrast could happen, who could Godzilla fight to make it,
Godzilla, the Fast and the Furious and the Godzilla.
You know what? That contract could happen though.
Oh yeah, yeah. You got anything?
Man, I got nothing on that one.
All right. Well, let's get back to your stuff as we are coming toward the end here. You mentioned earlier about writing your own comic, and I know you've been collaborating with some other people recently. What do you have coming out down the pipeline?
Well, I worked on Redman, the Kaiju Hunter, for a few years, which is a property owned by the people who own Ultraman. And then of course recently I've been doing more and more Ultraman stuff. I did 2 covers for the Marvel Ultraman comic, and hopefully there'll be more stuff in the future. I don't know. I did do the Ultraman pinball machine too, which was a lot of fun.
That is so cool.
It sold out in a terrifyingly short amount of time. And then I've got, I'm working on a comic called Eisenborg, which is another Ultraman adjacent property. We're doing a comic book adaptation of that.
When you say Ultraman adjacent, do you mean like it's similar to, or it's actually part of the universe?
Similar to and owned by the same company. And then I'm also doing a comic called Miss Medusa's Monstrous Menagerie, which is an original, completely original.
Paul Hanley.
With Paul Hanley, yeah. He's I came with the original concept. He got really excited about it and started writing it. And I'm like, yeah, you just want to write this? He's like, oh, I'm like 3 issues in. So we've been doing that.
I didn't know it was your original concept. That's really cool, because I've just been kind of following from a distance, and I just love that idea.
Oh,
I knew you were both involved heavily. I just didn't know to what level.
Yeah, no, I came up with the concept based on a poster I did for a little show in Oklahoma called SoonerCon. And I came up with this image of like this circus with monsters in it, and there's the ringmaster is a Gorgon, and I just love that image so much. I was like, oh, I might make a comic out of this, and I'm like, I don't have any time to do this, so Paul was like, I'll do it. So he and I are collaborating on that.
I love that. I'm really looking forward to that one.
Thank you. I'm very excited about it.
Well, Robert, Frank, thank you guys so much. Matt, sorry. I'm going to call you by your last name. Robert, Matt, thank you guys so much for coming by, and thank you guys for coming here and supporting all Kaiju as you should. It is great. Matt, you're going to be out in Artist Alley. Yep. Robert, you're here in the hallway with the other cosplayers?
In the hallway.
I'm actually in where the celebrity area is. Like I'm across from the Power Rangers, and
you are a celebrity. You know this.
Oh, I thought that was a mistake.
Oh.
And
you're not people anymore. You're celebrity.
Ew. But I like being people.
You can be both.
And your table is right out there, right?
Yep.
Yeah. He's kind of hard to miss.
Like the first one as you come in.
Yep.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you guys very much, and thank you guys very much.